Chapter 1. The Birthday They Forgot. They forgot my birthday again, but that was not the part that broke me. What broke me was finding out my own children were secretly trying to take my shop, the one place I built from nothing, and sell it behind my back. They even brought in a commercial buyer to survey the building in secret. But while they were planning to erase my life, I had already created something they never expected, a hidden heritage trust, a legal shield they could not break. And on the morning they arrived with contracts in their hands, believing they were finally taking everything from me, my lawyer stepped out from the back room with the documents that would end their plan in seconds. My name is Marianne, and this is the story of how a 70-year-old woman let the truth do the revenge her heart was too tired to fight for. I woke up on my 70th birthday to the faint creaking of the old heater in the little bungalow behind my shop. The kitchen was still cold, the kind of Oregon morning chill that sat on your shoulders until the kettle finally boiled. I stood there for a moment, both hands wrapped around the chipped counter, letting the quiet remind me of something I had learned long ago. Birthdays get quieter as you get older, but silence hits differently when it has lasted 15 years. I glanced at the row of framed photos above the pantry. My husband's face in the picture from 2009 still looked warm and alive, which felt like a trick of time. He died the following spring. My children drifted away after that, not all at once, just step by step until calling me felt like charity and visiting felt like an inconvenience. I used to wish for a wrapped present or a store-bought cake. Eventually, I settled for a single message that sounded like it came from someone who remembered I existed. I used to hope for kindness. Now I simply hoped not to feel foolish for expecting it. I put on my coat and walked out to the shop. Riverside Bend was just waking up. The sun had not fully broken over the river yet, and mist hung low along Main Street. I unlocked the front door of the shop, pushed it open, and the familiar scent of old books and cedar swallowed me in a way that felt both comforting and lonely. This town had been good to me, in its own quiet way, but it had also become the place where the distance between me and my own children started to feel like a canyon. My phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Allison. I reached for it slowly. It read that if I was thinking about transferring ownership of the shop, I should tell her so she could handle things properly. No greeting, no signature, no birthday wish, nothing warm enough to soften the fact that she had sent it at 6:30 in the morning as if she were contacting a client and not her mother. It struck me the way cold water does when it spills down your back. Sharp, awakening. This was not affection, it was interest. I put the phone away before the sting could turn into something else. A few customers drifted in and out during the morning. I rearranged the shelf of glass figurines and polished the brass lamp by the window. Small motions I had repeated for decades. Around noon, I saw Mark's shadow through the glass before he pushed the door open. He gave me a smile I had not seen in years, but it flickered too quickly to be convincing. He said he was checking on me. He said he had been worried, but within minutes he asked if I still had the updated insurance papers in the shop office and whether the deed for the property was stored in the safe or at home. He tried to wrap the questions in concern. I just let him talk. Every word told me more about his motives than his tone ever could. Mark had always been the child who loved me openly, but he was also the one most easily cornered by his own choices. I did not scold him for the questions. I only watched him. And something in my silence made him restless. He left just as quickly as he arrived, saying he had somewhere else to be. Later that afternoon, while moving a crate in the back storage room, I paused beside the locked cabinet where I kept the small silver box I bought in Berlin in 2003. I brushed the hand across the cabinet door. 22 years I had kept that box close. I never thought of it as valuable in the way my children calculated value. It was significant because of what it represented to me. I closed the cabinet gently. Some stories were not meant to be touched too often. The rest of the day passed quietly. A couple from Washington stopped by to ask about antique maps. A teenager wandered the aisles without buying anything. By 5 o'clock, Riverside Bend was already slipping into its evening hush. I turned the sign to closed, locked the door, and reached to slide the mail through the narrow slot behind the counter. That was when I saw it. A thick envelope, no return address, shoved under the door sometime during the afternoon. I picked it up and opened it right there. Inside was a printed survey request from Pine Brook Commercial Group, a company I had never dealt with. At the bottom of the form was the requester's name, Allison Carter. My daughter, my child, the person who used to bring me homemade cards on my birthday and now treated my life's work like an asset waiting to be liquidated. I folded the papers, took them outside, and sat on the wooden step in front of the shop. The sun was setting behind the hillside, washing the whole street in a soft amber light, the kind of light that made everything look gentle even when the truth was not. I whispered to myself because there was no one else to hear it. It is not the loneliness that wakes you up. It's the moment you realize someone you love is trying to erase the story you spent your whole life writing. I let the evening breeze settle over me and stayed there until the light began to fade. A pause, a breath, the kind of stillness that comes right before something shifts.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 2. Quiet Preparations. The last time I felt that kind of stillness was 15 years earlier, when I stood in front of my husband's grave and realized I was the only one actually saying goodbye. In my memory, the cemetery outside Portland was gray and damp, but not from rain. It was that heavy Pacific Northwest sky that looks like it might cry, but never quite does. I remember the smell of damp earth and cut grass. I remember the sound of the minister speaking in a calm, practiced voice about a man he never really knew. I remember my hands gripping the handle of my umbrella so hard my fingers hurt. Allison and Mark were there, of course. Allison in a black dress that looked more like something from a business conference than a funeral, standing 3 steps away from me with her arms folded tight across her chest. Mark with his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, eyes darting everywhere but to the casket. The 3 of us formed a crooked line, each one a little further away from the center than the person before. When the service ended, people came to hug me, to murmur the same soft phrases everyone says when they do not know what else to offer. I looked up once, hoping to see my children move closer. Instead, I saw Allison checking her phone behind a row of headstones. I saw Mark talking to a friend from college by the parking lot. That was the moment something inside me split. Not in anger, not yet. More like a quiet recognizing. This is what it looks like when a family starts to unhook itself. I carried that feeling with me back to Riverside Bend, back to the antique shop, back to the little bungalow where the heater moaned through winter nights. Over time, grief settled into the seams of my life and turned into something less sharp, but the distance between me and my children only grew wider. 2 days after my 70th birthday, I sat at a small table by the window in a coffee shop that overlooked the river. The place smelled like espresso and cinnamon and wet wool. Outside, the water moved slow and dark under a sky that could not decide whether it wanted to be blue or white. Edwin Blake walked in right on time, shrugging his coat off his shoulders. He was in his late 60s now, hair thinner and whiter than when we met, but his eyes were the same sharp gray that could see through dust and patina to the story underneath an object. He spotted me, raised a hand, and made his way over. "You look exactly the same," he said as he sat down and set his leather satchel on the floor. "That only means your memory is going," I answered, and it made him laugh. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I did not call you here to compliment you," he said. "I had someone stop by the museum last week. They were asking questions about the building your shop is in. Not your inventory, not your history with the town. The building. Year of construction, foundation work, zoning." I felt my shoulders stiffen a little. "Did they say who they were?" I asked. He nodded. "A man from Pinebrook Commercial Group. Said he was doing preliminary research on older properties along Main Street. But he did not ask about any other building, just yours. He showed me a photo on his phone to confirm it was the right one." I stared out at the river for a moment. 2 days earlier, I had found an envelope on my floor with that same company name on it. The request for a structural survey. My daughter's name at the bottom. The pieces clicked together quietly, like teeth finding their bite. "Did you tell him anything?" I asked. "Only what is public record," Edwin said. "Year it was built, previous owners, the fact that it has never changed hands since you bought it with your husband. I did not mention the collection. I am not reckless." I believed him. Edwin had been there in Berlin in 2003 when I bought that silver box and the crates that came with it. He had been the one to tell me that some of the pieces I had brought back were not just pretty trinkets, but fragments of history. We had been in a crowded market then, the kind where you could buy anything from war medals to broken clocks. I saw the silver box on a table pushed against a cracked wall. It was tarnished, the lid slightly crooked, but there was something about the engraving that made me reach for it. The seller told me it came from an old estate in the countryside. He named a price that made Edwin raise his eyebrows. I bought it anyway, and 3 crates of books and papers that came with it. "You know," I said now, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup, "that whole shipment cost more than my husband thought was reasonable." "He called it your midlife crisis," Edwin smiled. He did. I smiled back, but it faded quickly. He also told me I was irresponsible for bringing home things our kids would never appreciate. He wasn't wrong about that part. I thought of the silver box sitting in the locked cabinet in my back room, wrapped in a piece of blue cloth. For more than 20 years, I had taken it out only when I felt strong enough to remember that there were parts of my life my children knew nothing about, because they had never cared to ask. I wanted to keep it away from people who would see only an auction price. Edwin shifted in his seat. "I'm telling you this because the timing worries me," he said. "A surveyor asking about your building, your son hovering around your inventory, your daughter sending you messages about transferring ownership. It feels like a line of dominoes someone else has already set up." I took a deep breath. That line may have started Earlier than you think, I said. I told him then about the conversation in 2019 when Allison and Mark had shown up at my house in Portland with serious faces and a folder full of printed charts. They had talked about consolidating family assets, about efficiency, about how maintaining multiple accounts and properties was messy. They said things like, "We only want what is best for you, and this will protect you." They suggested putting everything, including the shop, into a shared trust that they would manage. When I told them no, Allison accused me of not trusting them. Mark sat there, tugging at his sleeve, eyes cast down, like he wanted to disappear. That night, I drove back to Riverside Bend with a knot in my stomach and the certainty that I needed someone in my corner who understood the language they were trying to use on me. That was when I made an appointment with Harriet Lowell in Portland. She was a property lawyer with a spine of steel and a voice that could slice paper. She listened to my story, all of it, from the day we bought the building to the day my children tried to fold me into their spreadsheets. Then she told me something simple. You are not obligated to hand over control of your life because other people find it inconvenient. We spent the next few months building something called the River Bend Heritage Trust. I didn't understand every term in the documents, not exactly, but I understood the shape of it. The shop and certain parts of my collection were placed into a structure that would protect them as historical assets and keep them from being casually sold off like used furniture. I remained the controlling trustee while I was alive. After me, a small council appointed by the trust charter would decide how to preserve what I left behind. I didn't tell my children, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I knew exactly how they would react. They would hear only the word no and miss all the reasons behind it. Now, sitting across from Edwin, as the river moved past the cafe windows, I pulled out my phone. Harriet had left one voicemail that morning. I had seen her name on the screen and saved it for later, as if opening it too soon might make everything too real. I pressed play and held the phone close. "Marianne, it's Harriet. I got your message and copies of those Pinebrook documents. If your daughter and whoever she is working with are getting serious, it might be time for me to come up and review things in person. I can be in Riverside Bend by the end of the week. If they are planning to make a move, we already have an answer. Call me back." Her voice was steady, almost casual. To her, this was a matter of clauses and codes. To me, it was the thin barrier between my life story staying mine or being rewritten as a line on someone else's investment portfolio. I ended the call and set the phone down. Edwin watched me. "Is that the lawyer you told me about?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "She is coming." He nodded slowly. "Good. It is time someone besides you knew exactly what is at stake." Later that afternoon, back at the shop, I walked into the small office behind the sales floor. The safe sat in the corner, low and solid, humming softly with the weight of everything I had tucked away there. I knelt, turned the dial with practiced fingers, and opened the heavy door. Inside, behind a stack of old ledgers and a tin box of family photos, was a worn yellow folder marked with a date, 2019. I slid it out and held it in my hands for a moment before opening it. The trust papers were all there, neatly clipped and crisp. Harriet had drawn little check marks in the margins where I had asked her to explain something 2 or 3 times. Seeing her handwriting made me feel less alone. I whispered it to the empty room, half to reassure myself, half to make sure I still believed it. I am not the kind of woman who waits for a storm before closing her windows. I put the folder back, shut the safe, spun the dial until it clicked. When I stepped out of the office, the late afternoon light was pouring through the front windows of the shop, turning dust into glitter in the air. I walked to the door, unlocked it just long enough to step outside, and watched the sun sink slowly toward the trees on the far side of the river. The day was not over yet, but something in it had shifted, and I could feel the weight of what was coming settle quietly into place.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 3: The Children's Intentions. On Monday morning, I walked into the shop a little before 9, turned the lights on, and started my routine. I had just finished dusting the glass case by the front when the bell over the door rang with a sharp sound that did not match the lazy pace of the street. Allison stepped inside like she was arriving at a property showing. Her heels clicked across the wooden floor, and instead of looking at me first, she let her eyes travel along the walls, up to the ceiling, over the shelves. She touched the window frame with her fingertips, pressed lightly on a support beam, inspected a crack in the paint near the baseboard. "Good morning, Mom." Her tone was pleasant, but it sounded like something she used in meetings. "Morning, Allison." "You should really think about repainting," she said, "or at least get someone to come in and check for structural issues. These older buildings can be unpredictable." "This one has survived a lot," I answered. "It knows how to hold itself up." She gave a short smile that never reached her eyes and moved toward the back of the shop, counting the steps between shelves, glancing at the ceiling again. "I have been thinking about you," she said. "You are 70 now, still running this place alone. It is a lot of work, a lot of responsibility. You should not have to carry all of that." "It's my routine," I said. "I know how to manage it." She turned to face me fully then, tilting her head slightly. "Mom, be serious. What happens if you get hurt here? If you have a fall? What if the roof leaks? What if there's a legal issue? You need someone to step in, someone who understands all the paperwork and the regulations. I work with properties every day. I can take this off your hands, make sure everything is safe for you." Her words were wrapped in concern, but the shape underneath was sharp. She was not looking at me the way a daughter looks at a mother. She was looking at the building, at the square footage, at the imagined number on an appraisal report. "I appreciate that you are thinking of me," I said, "but I am not ready to hand my life over to someone else for their convenience." "It's not about convenience," she said quickly. "It's about protection. You always think people are trying to control you when really we're trying to help." I watched the way her jaw tightened on the word "we." The way she said it told me Mark was in this from the start. "Is there some urgent danger I do not know about?" I asked. "Or are you already halfway through a plan you forgot to mention?" She flinched just a little, then forced another smile. "You always think the worst of me," she said. "I stopped by because I care. That's all." She checked her phone. "I have to go," she added. "Busy day. Just think about what I said. Maybe we can sit down later this week and talk details. It would really ease my mind." She left without touching me, without looking back. The bell rang again, and the shop felt smaller after she walked out, as if her intentions were still hanging in the air, taking up space. Over the next few days, Mark started appearing more often. At first, I was almost glad to see him. He had always been the one to drop by unexpectedly when he was younger, to steal cookies from the jar in the back room, to ask me how my day was. Now he came in with a restless energy that made him bump into things. On Wednesday, he appeared mid-afternoon, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. "Hey, Mom, got a minute?" "For you, I can find one." He walked around, pretending to admire a few items, picking up a porcelain vase, setting it down, opening a drawer he had opened 100 times when he was a boy. "This place is really something. You have a lot tied up in here. It must be worth quite a bit by now. It's worth my time and my memories. He shifted his weight. So, look, he said, I, hit a bit of a rough patch. Some stuff did not work out, business-wise. I was wondering if you could help me cover a couple things, just for now. How much is a couple things? I asked. He named a number that told me he was in deeper than he wanted to admit. I gave him less than he asked for, enough that I could live with it, not enough to make his mess feel painless. When I handed him the cash, his shoulders sagged with relief. Allison said the shop could solve everything if you sold it, he muttered, almost under his breath. I looked at him. He froze when he realized he had said it out loud. She said what? I asked. Nothing, he replied too quickly. She was just talking. You know how she is, always planning, trying to find solutions. Solutions to whose problems? Yours, hers, or mine? He didn't answer. He stuffed the money into his pocket, kissed my cheek in a distracted way, and left. As the door closed behind him, I understood that their visits were not separate concerns. They were two hands moving the same piece across a board. On Friday morning, Allison came back, this time with her phone already in her hand as she walked through the door. She wanted to introduce you to someone, just quickly. She tapped the screen and held it up so I could see the video call. A man appeared in the small frame, sitting in what looked like a sleek office. Black hair going silver at the temples, dark blazer, confident smile. Mom, this is Victor Hale. He works with Pine Brook Commercial Group. They specialize in evaluating older properties. We've been speaking about some options for you. Mrs. Rowe, the man on the screen said, I've heard a lot about your shop. It looks like a beautiful piece of Main Street history. That it is, I answered, and it's not for sale. He chuckled softly. Absolutely, he said. We're not talking about any kind of sale at this stage. I'm just interested in doing a preliminary assessment, checking structural integrity, code compliance, things like that. It's a complimentary service we offer for select long-term owners. Allison thought it might give you peace of mind. Allison was moving around the shop as he spoke, angling the phone so he could see the ceiling beams, the back wall, and the emergency exit. Victor asked her to pause here and there to zoom in on a crack in the plaster, on a beam joint, on the line where the floor met the wall. He spoke about me like I was a line in a file. I watched him on the screen, watched my daughter become his camera operator, watched my shop become an image to be measured and dissected. I have been here for decades, I said. If there were serious issues, I think I would have noticed. Of course, he replied. What you have done is impressive. We just like to help owners like you plan for the future. No pressure, no rush. Allison ended the call after a few more angles, promising Victor she would send him additional photos and some basic measurements later. When she slipped her phone into her bag, she looked pleased with herself. That was harmless, she said. You worry too much. They're not looking at this building the way I do, I said quietly, or the way your father did. She rolled her eyes. That is exactly the problem. You're sentimental. They're practical. One of these approaches actually keeps you safe. She left before I could answer her. I did not try to stop her. An hour later, my phone buzzed on the counter, a message from Edwin. That man Victor was here again, asking about historic status of your building. Wanted to see old registry documents. I played dumb. You need to be careful. I sent a short reply to let him know I had heard him, then stared at the screen for a long time. The pattern was no longer subtle. Allison opening the door, Mark feeding her information, Victor stepping in with his tape measure and his corporate smile. By evening, the sky had darkened and the street outside was nearly empty. I locked the front door, flipped the sign, and went into the back office to close out the day. My laptop set on the desk, its screen glowed in the dim light. A new email notification blinked in the corner. From Allison. Subject line said draft proposal. I clicked it open. The message was brief, full of business language, nothing motherly in it at all. Attached was a document named Intention to Transfer Ownership, Draft. I opened it and read. Pinebrook Commercial Group was listed as the acquiring party. There was mention of restructuring, of management rights, and the appointment of Allison as primary decision maker and Mark as the secondary. Near the bottom, I saw a line that made my stomach tighten. Effective date requested. It listed the day of my 70th birthday, 3 days earlier. So they had forgotten the date after all. They had simply decided it would look better on a contract than on a cake. I scrolled to the end and let out a slow breath. They wanted me to sign it at a meeting later that week. They planned to present this as a logical next step, as an act of love. If they think I am weak because I'm old, they have forgotten who held this family together when everything else fell apart. For a moment, I considered forwarding the document to Harriet, but I knew she would be on the road soon enough and we would go over it together in person. For now, I needed something simpler. I closed the document, deleted the email, and emptied the trash folder. Not because it didn't matter, but because I wanted the next move to be mine, not theirs. Then I shut the laptop, turned off the office light, and stepped back into the shop. The shelves stood in their usual places, the air smelled of old wood and lemon oil, and outside the last traces of daylight were fading past the windows. It was a good place to stand still and decide, quietly, what I was willing to fight for.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 4. Unlocking the Truth. Harriet arrived 3 mornings later, and I knew she was in town before she even reached my door. Riverside Bend sits just a few turns off Highway 84, and when her call came through saying she had pulled off the exit, I stepped outside and saw her car approaching from the distance, moving with the steady purpose that marked everything she did. She parked beneath the old maple tree across from the shop and stepped out with the leather coat pulled tight around her shoulders. The air was crisp, carrying that dry winter bite Oregon gets even in early spring. She lifted a heavy case from the back seat, shut the door with a firm motion, and walked toward me. Her expression was not severe, but it was the kind that held no room for wishful thinking. "Good to see you, Marianne." "You too, Harriet. Long drive." "I have had worse," she said, glancing toward the shop. "We should talk somewhere private." We went through the front door and into the small office behind the sales floor. The room felt even smaller than usual with her presence in it, as if the weight of her knowledge had taken physical shape. She placed the case on the desk and began removing folders, each one tabbed and labeled with meticulous precision. "I reviewed the survey documents your daughter filed, and the internal notes from Pinebrook that my colleague retrieved. Their intent is clear, but they made a critical mistake." "What mistake?" I asked. "They assumed you owned this building outright in the traditional sense, but you do not. Not since 2019. She opened a folder and pressed a few pages forward so that I could see the letterhead of the Riverbend Heritage Trust. Her voice softened, but did not lose its firmness. "You remember these terms. We discussed them at length. The trust was formally activated 6 years ago. The building and the designated items in your collection were transferred into protective status. As controlling trustee, you retain full authority during your lifetime. However, no sale, no restructuring, and no reassessment can occur without approval from the Trust Council. That approval will not happen. Not now. Not for what your daughter is planning." I looked over the pages, tracing the familiar signatures and stamps with my eyes. Seeing them in print again felt like opening a door I had closed quietly years ago. "So they cannot touch it," I said. "Not legally," she answered, "not with any degree of subtlety. They can attempt to pressure you emotionally, but they cannot execute a transfer. Even requesting a structural assessment tied to a potential acquisition crosses into questionable territory." Before I could respond, the office door opened gently and Edwin stepped inside. He carried a thick envelope under his arm, his breath still visible from the cold outside. "I hope I am not interrupting," he said. "You are right on time," Harriet replied. "We need your report." Edwin set the envelope on the desk and removed a stack of documents. The first page held a photo of the silver box, polished and centered under museum lighting. "The preliminary valuation is complete," he said. "If authenticated to its full provenance, which we are still investigating, the box and its contents could be valued at around $250,000, possibly more." I let out a breath I had not meant to release. I had known it was important, but not this important. Harriet slid the report closer to her and skimmed through the notes. "This raises the stakes considerably," she said. "If Pinebrook attempted to assess this property as a commercial asset while ignoring its protected historical content, that becomes a legal issue. And if your daughter knowingly facilitated that, she may be responsible for misrepresentation." Edwin frowned slightly. He also learned something else. Victor visited the county office yesterday. He asked to see the original land registry, the historical zoning forms, and the old landmark application from the 80s. He is building a file, not for renovation, for acquisition. Harriet looked at me. "That aligns with the documents he's been drafting," she said. "This gives us more than enough to push back. But Marianne, the question is what you want to do." I sat down slowly, feeling the chair creak beneath me. The report, the trust papers, the email from Allison earlier that week, all of it formed a strange quiet in the room. A quiet that demanded clarity. I want them to show themselves fully. I want them to walk into a room believing they are about to win, and then I want the truth to meet them there. Harriet studied my face. "You want to confront them. I want them to confront their own actions. I don't need yelling or scenes. I need them to understand that what they have tried to take is not an object, but a legacy. Mine, their father's, even theirs if they had chosen to treat it with respect." Edwin nodded, his voice gentle. "You deserve that, Marianne." Harriet exchanged a glance with him, then said, "If your goal is clarity, we arrange a structured meeting. Nothing dramatic, no surprises for us, only for them. We will do it here, at the shop. This weekend. Your birthday week." I felt a small smile rise at the corner of my mouth. "Seems fitting," I said. Harriet began organizing the folders into neat stacks. "I will bring the physical trust documents, the full set. They cannot be contested by anyone in the room. Edwin will bring the valuation certificate, and I will have the Preservation Council send the preliminary recognition for heritage status. You will not need to say much. The documents will do the speaking." Edwin added, "I will make sure the artifact report is concise. No numbers they can twist, no vague terms, only facts." We spent the next hour going over the logistics. Harriet wanted the chairs arranged so that no one felt cornered, but there was a clear division of authority. She recommended locking away the valuable pieces during the meeting. She made notes about tone, about letting them speak first, about refusing to sign or touch any document they brought. When we had finished, Harriet closed the last folder and looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before. It had warmth in it. Marianne, you are not just protecting a building, you are protecting your own story. That is worth more than anything Pinebrook could offer. I felt a quiet strength settle in my chest. I am also protecting them from their own greed. If they cannot see the line between wanting security and wanting control, then someone has to draw it. Harriet nodded once, slowly. The sun was beginning to set by the time they both left. I walked them to the door, watched Edwin head toward his truck with his envelope tucked safely under his coat, watched Harriet lift her case into the trunk of her car. When they pulled away and the street grew calm again, I stepped back inside the shop. The office lights were still glowing faintly, casting warm rectangles across the worn wooden floor. I moved through the shelves, touching the edges of familiar objects, feeling the stories they held. By the time I reached the front door, the sky beyond the windows had gone a deep amber, the kind of color that fades too quickly if you stare at it for too long. I stood there until the light thinned into evening. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation, but for that moment the world was still, and I let myself breathe in the calm before stepping into whatever came next.
If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 5. The Birthday Reckoning. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. The light outside was still pale and thin, but my mind was already awake, moving through the steps I had decided on. It was the day my children had chosen for my signature. I had decided it would be the day I chose something else. I dressed more carefully than usual. A dark blue sweater, black slacks, the silver locket my husband had given me on our 30th anniversary. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me feel grounded. In the shop, I straightened where it needed straightening, locked away the most valuable pieces in the back room, and wiped the front counter with slow, deliberate motions. The space felt poised, like a stage before the curtain rises. Harriet arrived first, right on time. She came through the front door carrying a slim leather folder instead of the heavy case. Her hair pulled back, her expression calm and focused. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I answered. "You have everything?" "I do," she said. "We are ready." Edwin came a few minutes later, holding a single sealed envelope and a smaller folder. He gave me a small nod, then moved quietly to the back office where Harriet was setting up. The plan was simple. I would greet my children alone at first. Once they laid their cards on the table, we would lay ours on top. At 10, the bell over the door rang again. Allison walked in with that same confident stride, a structured coat over a pressed blouse, a large bag on her shoulder. Mark followed behind her, eyes darting around the shop, hands already starting to fidget. "Happy birthday, Mom," Allison said, but the words came out like a formality. She did not move to hug me. "Yeah," Mark added, "happy birthday." "Thank you," I said. She set her bag on the counter, unzipped it, and pulled out a stack of papers clipped together. "We thought this would be a good time to sit down and go over some things," she said, "while we are all here." "All of us are not here yet," I replied. She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You will see," I said. "But go ahead. Tell me what you have planned." She laid the stack on the counter and turned it so it faced me. "This is the formal draft to transfer management and ownership oversight to Pinebrook Commercial Group. They will take care of all the maintenance, legal obligations, tax efficiencies. You will retain a generous stipend and full access while you are alive. Mark and I will handle the decisions you do not need to be burdened with anymore." She said the word burden as if she had found a polite way to say useless. Mark cleared his throat. "It is just, a way to make sure you are not stuck dealing with everything. You deserve to rest a little." I let my eyes scan the top page. There were the familiar phrases from the previous draft: transfer of authority, appointment of primary and secondary managers, all wrapped around the assumption that I was nothing more than the current occupant of a commercial property waiting to be passed along. I lifted my gaze to Allison. "And if I say no, what happens then?" She smiled, but there was tension in it. "You said no in 2019. Look where that got us. Nothing is organized, nothing is optimized. This is the smart move, the safe move. You cannot seriously intend to keep running a commercial property alone at your age. It's irresponsible." For whom? For me or for you? Edwin shifted, looking from her to me. "Mom, we really think this is best." I studied their faces. There was no joy in them at being with me on my birthday, only expectation. "All right, if we are going to talk about what is best, we should have everyone at the table." I turned toward the back. "Harriet, you can come in now." The office door opened and Harriet stepped into the room, carrying her folder. Allison went pale the instant she saw her. "What is she doing here?" Allison demanded. "This is a family matter." Family matters can become legal matters very quickly. It is better when everyone is clear. Mark blinked. "You brought a lawyer?" he said to me. "I've had a lawyer for years. You just chose not to notice." Harriet set her folder down next to Allison's stack, then looked at both of my children. "My name is Harriet Lowell. I represent your mother and the Riverbend Heritage Trust. Before you continue discussing any transfer of ownership, there is information you need to understand." Allison opened her mouth as if to argue, but Harriet was already sliding a document toward me. "Marianne, these are the certified papers establishing the trust in 2019. As you know, the building and specified contents of this shop were placed into a protected structure at that time." She turned to Allison and Mark. "Your mother is the controlling trustee for the rest of her life. No sale, transfer, or management restructuring can occur without approval from the Trust Council. Pinebrook Commercial Group was not consulted. You were not named as decision makers. You, in fact, have no legal authority over this property." Allison flushed a deep pink. "That cannot be right," she said. "We have documents. Victor assured me this was all above board." Harriet tilted her head slightly. "Mr. Hale based his plan on an incorrect premise. He disregarded existing filings. He also initiated a valuation process that ignored the protected status of certain assets. That is not above board. At best, it's sloppy. At worst, it's a violation." Edwin stepped forward then, placing his envelope on the counter and opening it to reveal a single sheet with the museum letterhead. "This is the formal valuation of the silver box and related materials in your mother's collection. $250,000 conservatively, all listed as part of the trust and under consideration for heritage recognition." Mark stared at the number, his face draining of color.
I took pictures of it, he whispered. For Allison, for Victor. I didn't know. He looked at me, eyes wet and wet. I didn't know, Mom, I swear. I just thought they were trying to help. I reached across the counter and laid my hand on his arm. I believe you did not understand the full weight of what you were doing. I understand. But understanding does not mean I hand over everything I've worked for. He swallowed hard, tears brightening his lashes. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Allison, meanwhile, was trembling with anger. You went behind our backs, she said to me. You set this up with a lawyer and a trust, and you never told us. You don't trust us. You'd rather trust strangers and boards and councils than your own children. I met her gaze. You came to me with charts and proposals and plans to fold my life into your portfolio. You talked about consolidating assets like you were cleaning out an attic. That was when I realized you didn't see this place as my work or my home. You saw it as a line on a balance sheet. I did not go behind your back, Allison. I stepped out of your shadow. You are using the law against us, she shot back. No, I am using the law to refuse your attempt to destroy what I built long before you were old enough to walk. The room was so quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the cooler in the back. Harriet broke the silence by sliding a sealed envelope toward me. This came from the County Preservation Board yesterday. Happy birthday. I opened it with careful fingers. Inside was a certificate with an official seal and my name in neat print. It recognized the shop as a pending local heritage site, noting its contribution to the cultural fabric of Riverside Bend. It confirmed my right to operate it as long as I wished under the protections of the trust. I breathed out slowly.
That is your real birthday present, Mom, Edwin said gently. Harriet looked at Allison and Mark. This status makes any attempt to quietly transfer or repurpose the property far more difficult, she said. If Mr. Hale or his company proceed, it will be very visible and very public. Allison seemed to understand then, not just that her plan had failed, but that her reputation as a professional realtor could suffer if word got out that she had tried to push a protected property through a private deal. She stepped back from the counter. I cannot believe you would do this to us, she said. I cannot believe you thought you could sell my life without asking me, I replied. For a second, I thought she might say something else, something that reached beyond anger. But whatever it was, never surfaced. She grabbed her bag, turned, and walked out of the shop. The bell rang sharply, then settled. Through the glass, I saw her stride down the sidewalk, shoulders rigid, mouth set. Mark stayed where he was. His face was streaked with tears, his hands empty. I messed this up, he said. All of it. I let her talk me into thinking this was just paperwork. I did not want to look too closely. I just wanted my problems to go away. Then start by looking at them, I said. Not at my walls or my shelves, at your own choices. Get help. Talk to someone who knows how to untangle the knots you are in. There are things I can still do for you as your mother, but there are things you have to do yourself. He nodded, shoulders shaking. I will try, he said. I really will. He hugged me then, a real hug, not a distracted half gesture he had given me before. When he finally left, the shop felt open again, as if a pressure valve had been released. Harriet and Edwin gathered their things.
We exchanged a few practical words about next steps, about sending copies and keeping records. Then they too went out into the afternoon light, leaving me alone at the counter with the trust papers and the heritage certificate. I stood there for a long time, listening to the quiet. The shop looked the same as it had the day before, the same floors, the same shelves, the same beams overhead. But something inside me had shifted, not into triumph, into something calmer. Sometimes winning is not about getting more than you had before. Sometimes it is about refusing to let anyone take away what is already yours. I walked to the front window and watched the people passing by on Main Street, unaware of the little battle that had just been fought behind the glass. I thought of all the times I had stayed silent because I did not want to be seen as difficult or ungrateful. I thought of the way my children had underestimated me. If you have ever been treated like you were easy to move out of the way, remember this. Silence can be a strategy, not a surrender. You are allowed to prepare in the quiet, to gather your proof, to wait for the moment when standing up will actually matter. And when that moment comes, let the truth do the heavy lifting. Let it show who you are and who they chose to be. If this story feels familiar, if it touches something in you that you thought no one else understood, stay with me for the next stories. There are more lives like mine, more quiet battles, more endings where dignity wins. And if you have your own story of being underestimated, tell it. Sometimes sharing it is the first step toward taking your life back.